can you start recording from your respective rooms, please? And thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this conversation. I'd like to begin, and we've done that in some respect by acknowledging the natural world around us, but I would like to acknowledge the lands on which we gather today. For me, calling in from Ottawa, it is the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, who have nurtured and loved and lived on this land since time immemorial. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to create and collaborate, live and work on this land. And I commit myself to doing the best that I can to care for it as a guest here. Wherever you might be joining us from, and I know we have just on our panel alone, we have quite the representation across the nation. So if you'd like to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat, we welcome that as an opportunity for us to learn from one another. So I am Leah. I am part of the ECoH team here at CMHC. And today, as you know, we're hosting a webinar entitled Turning Insights into Action, Artful Approaches to Housing Research. The webinar today will delve into arts-based research that is being conducted as part of the Aging in Right Place Partnership, which is a 5-year cross-Canada interdisciplinary inquiry investigating promising practices in support of housing service and design for older adults who are experiencing homelessness or have experiences of homelessness. I'm particularly excited about this webinar because we will be leaving the session, as I understand it, with some practical tools to apply in our own work, like the use of photovoice and arts-based solicitation interviews, practices in how to disseminate arts-based knowledge and research, and a better understanding of how these unique modalities can be used directly to inform housing design, operations, and policy. So bringing us this amazing, delicious content and intersection of ideas is Dr. Alison Grittner, Christine Walsh, and Kari Spivak, who will be sharing all of their rich knowledge and experiences with us today. So I would like you to know what kind of company you're in. They were a bit shy to share a little bit about themselves, and I'm assuming that you've read their bios in the email, but I think it's important for us to toot their horns a little bit. So I will do that for you, and then we'll have a few quick housekeeping notes, and then I'm going to pass it off to Christine. But in our company today, Dr. Alison Grittner, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Social Work at the University of Cape Breton, previously educated in not only architecture and fine arts, but also history. And this transdisciplinary research approach involves working with and alongside structurally vulnerable communities to reimagine, co-design, and reconstruct everyday environments and built spaces towards greater equity, empowerment, and dignity. We're really happy to have you here, Alison, and thank you for all of the work that you've done to put this webinar together. We are also in the company of Christine Walsh, who is a professor at the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Calgary. And her work and her research centers around the voices of marginalized populations, including older adults with histories of abuse, social exclusion, poverty, and homelessness. And Christine aims to create the necessary knowledge base, and today is a case in point, to inform policy and program development to improve the health and social well-being of vulnerable members of society. And joining them is Kari Spivak, who is pursuing her Master's of Social Work through the University of Waterloo, currently working as a research assistant with the University of Calgary under the supervision of Dr. Christine Walsh within the Aging in the Right Place project. So thank you to the three of you for being here and for sharing what you are exploring and learning with us. I have a few annoying housekeeping notes to share with all of you who are attending today, just so you know how to navigate the webinar as we are going about it. But while I do that, our panelists have asked if we could prompt you to grab a writing implement and some form of surface to write on, whether it's paper or a napkin. Since this will be an interactive session, you'll be prompted with some activities and in a traditional way. So you'll be doing it at your desk as opposed to on some virtual board. So if you could grab paper and a pen or something while I give you the housekeeping notes, that would be great. If you're able to multitask in that way. So after the presentation and activities, there will be about 10 minutes for Q&A. So my first housekeeping note is that if you do have questions or comments throughout the presentation, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. And anything that doesn't get responded to or addressed directly in the chat, we'll make sure we pull it back into the Q&A at the end. Our webinar today is in English, but we are offering simultaneous translation in French. So if you would like to join the French room, there's a globe icon at the bottom of your screen with the word interpretation underneath it. If you press on it, you'll see you can toggle between both the English and French rooms as needed. And there is a dubbed interpreter in the French room. And also, if you would like to ask questions in French, you are very welcome to do so. We will respond to them in French. A little bit about ECoH. So our webinars are member driven, and therefore the words and opinions expressed are of the presenters, and they're entirely their own, and they are the experts. So if you do have further questions and you'd like to know more, you'd like to reconnect with them, they have graciously agreed to share their contact information. You'll see it at the end of the presentation, and we'll include it in the chat as well. So you can follow up with them and ask additional questions and stay connected that way. One more housekeeping rule, if you could just keep your mics and cameras turned off for now. I believe that's enforced to some degree, but it's still in our notes here just in case. We just want to be able to make sure we can hear the presenters clearly and we can focus on them while they're presenting. But if you do have a question later on and you'd like to articulate it vocally, then just raise your hand, the little icon, and we'll make sure to unmute you. And sorry, one last thing, the recording, the event is recorded and it will be uploaded. So if you want to share what you learned today with others and you feel like the best way to do that is to share this link to the recording, we'll make sure to get that to you as soon as it's uploaded into our system. It will be available on the Expert Community on Housing platform as well as the Housing Knowledge Center. On that note, if you haven't joined the Expert Community on Housing, please do. We'll share a little bit more about that at the end of the webinar. That's all of my housekeeping notes. Now I can take a breath and I am going to pass it over to you, Christine, and I will start sharing my screen. Thumbs up, yes. Should I start sharing the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So thanks, Leah, for the kind introduction, and thanks, ECoH, for inviting us to do this work. When we discussed as a team, we're a team coming from all over the country, but really based in Calgary, doing the work in Calgary. When we discussed what we wanted to share with the ECoH folks, and I should also say thank you to the other ECoH people in the room, and especially the translators who are going to do the majority of the work this morning or this afternoon. So when we discussed what we wanted to talk about, a number of us have been using arts-based practices in our research for some a short period of time, but some over decades. And more recently, we've been thinking about how the practice that we use to engage, people who are seldom on the policy realm, seldom are able to contribute. We're wondering how we can translate those voices to policymakers. So we are speaking today about how we use arts-based research and how it can be used to speak to policy. And in this case, we're going to use the work that we've done in the Aging in the Right Place project. So the next slide, please. So I know we've had a land acknowledgement, but I also want to acknowledge where this work was done. It arises out of the University of Calgary and the traditional peoples of Treaty 7 in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. And the city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So I guess all of us as people visiting this land need to consider how we are invited guests on the land and how we can play a part in reconciliation. Next slide, please. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about experiential arts-based methods, and we're going to actually get you to be involved because our practice is very experiential and we want you to embrace that aspect. Then we're going to talk about how this work, how we can use it to disseminate the findings of our research, and finally how that can be translated into policy. So we're going to end by asking you to consider how you might use arts-based research in your housing research and in other forms of research to really meaningfully partner with groups of people who are seldom on the policy realm, and how you can use arts-based research to bring their voices forward and to inform practice and policy. Next slide, please. So I think Leah's talked a little bit about the Aging in the Right Place project. We are in our final year of the Aging in Right Place project, and it was really to look at promising practices within housing and services for older adults experiencing homelessness. And as Leah mentioned, it's being done in 3 cities across Canada: Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal. And our team is the Calgary-based team. So we're going to talk about the work that we're doing specifically. It's a very large project. It has more than 24 co-applicants, collaborators, partner organizations. We have a lived experience panel that includes 9 older adults who have experienced homelessness, and it's a cohesive but diverse project in terms of different cities do different things in their arts practices, I think. So next slide, please. So I'm turning on to you, Alison. So I'm going to turn on to Alison next, who's going to explain more about what arts-based methods are and highlight a few that we've used in our own research.
Thanks, Christine. So when I joined the AIRP project, I was so excited that there was a research project looking at lived experiences of housing specifically and using arts-based methods to understand that, because coming from prior to transferring over, moving into academia, I was trained and educated as an architect, and I worked on designing and operations and policy within supportive housing, different supportive housing programs and projects. And I noticed in working in those, what was really missing was the lived experience of individuals who were really just doing standard interviews, thinking about how people experience space and how they generate human meaning making out of their environments. It's really difficult to kind of capture on perhaps like a quantitative survey or an audit or any of those tools. So and seeing how the arts-based methods have been implemented in the AIRP project, I think has really illustrated the potential and kind of the potent possibilities of using these forms of methods to really understand the lived experience of these spaces that we are providing, designing, operating, and delivering for really vulnerable individuals. So arts-based methods tap into non-linguistic dimensions. So that means we use visual, in the sensory realm, we'll use as well how spaces feel, trying to really understand what in design, a lot of times we would talk about the atmosphere. So it helps to both understand the atmosphere as experienced, And then it offers a really meaningful perspective for research as well. And so in the AIRP project, we creatively mix methods to expand our understanding of older adults with experiences of homelessness living in different supportive housing environments, which include temporary shelters, transitional housing, long-term care facilities, and other forms of supportive housing. And we've found that in moving beyond these standard interviews, that it provides us new possibilities for understanding really complex social problems that include homelessness, experiences of trauma, substance use, all of these really salient social issues that we are wrestling with in our worlds right now. I have the next slide, please. Thanks. So 3 forms of arts-based methods that I'm going to take you through today that we've used in the AIRP project in Calgary are 1, photovoice, 2, graphic elicitation accompanied through the interview process, and ethnodrama, which is essentially turning some of the research data into theater pieces. Can I have the next slide? So photovoice is at the core of our research methods in AIRP, and photovoice is a participatory action research strategy where in the AIRP project we ask participants to take photographs of places, spaces, experiences in their supportive housing environments that either support or challenge their ability to age in the right place. And so participants go and they take the photos and then they come back, they share the photos with the interviewers, and they provide a title of the photos that they've taken. And then they also tell and explain the story of their photos and why they took them. And we found in this, particularly surrounding experiences of housing and the built environment, as well as housing operations, they provide a really rich understanding of how individuals are experiencing those spaces and the meaning that they are kind of creating in their own lives surrounding them. I have the next slide. So here's an example of one of the photovoice responses, the photo and story of an individual living at the Kirby shelter, which is an emergency shelter for individuals fleeing elder abuse in downtown Calgary. It's actually been renamed to, I believe it's the Unison now. And so one of the really interesting things that we found coming out of the photovoice was the importance of the natural environment for individuals. And so both within the shelter and also in the surrounding context. And so this is a story of one of the individuals talking about how important the flowers and all of the landscaping, the surrounding area, were to them concerning aging in the right place, and importantly, how that, she says here, just the colors and they relax you. So that connection to the natural environment providing really important physiological and psychological restoration. And I have the next slide. At another site in Calgary, we did graphic elicitation. So this simply involves creating art during the research interview. And so for this, was while discussing individuals, residents, experiences of Art Hive and supportive shelter. We created, the interviewer created art with the individual that reflected and explored their experiences of what community meant to them. And so in doing this, it creates or it provides the participant more time to reflect, more time to think through their answers, and also another means of explaining that affective experience of being in community and what community meant to them through creating art. So can we go to the next slide? And so here's an example of a piece of art that the individual created on the right, in response while they were telling this story that you can see on the left. And I'm just going to give you a minute to read it. Can we go on to the next slide? And so the third form of art space methods that we've used is ethnodrama. And we've done this after, sorry, I got distracted by a question in there. So we use ethnodrama. And so ethnodrama is where you essentially translate the data, use the data collected, in this case, the participants' stories, and you turn that into a piece of theater. So if you can go on to the next slide, it will show a piece of the dialogue from the theater piece that was created from the stories of the individuals living at the Kirby shelter. And in doing so, I think as you can read through this, this piece, it really is able to articulate and communicate the really deep affective and felt experiences of living in a transitional emergency shelter, having experienced elder abuse in their life. So can you go on to the next slide, Leah? So another, thinking about dissemination, another way that we've used art space methods is by creating multimodal short film documentaries called digital shorts. And these are typically created to explore a social issue, and they involve remixing arts-based materials to create a video that tells a specific social and research story. So for the AIRP project, we have remixed some of the photovoice materials on specific topics. One of them is sensory experiences in the built environment. And then the one we're going to share with you right now is on experiences of nature and the built environment in supportive housing for individuals, for older adults with experiences of homelessness. And we're gonna play the video for you, so you can see what this involves, as long as the tech works.
This film was created on Treaty 7 territory in Mohkinstsis. Treaty 7 is the traditional territory of the people of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Arhe Nakota Nation, including the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bears Paw bands, and the Tsuut'ina Nation. Treaty 7 is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. This film is being presented in Mexico City. a city built upon Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire and homeland of the Aztec or Mexica people. I am a Canadian settler with ancestry from Italy. I am able-bodied, middle-class, and educated, and have benefited from a life where I've been given the tools and opportunity to build a relationship with the natural world. Despite employing anti-oppressive and decolonial approaches to this research, these identity markers play a role in shaping how the data was viewed and how patterns were recognized and understood. I begin by inviting you to think about what makes a space a place. Axon and colleagues define place attachment as involvement in a particular physical space over time, leading to fondness or attachment. The experience of place attachment is considered to be necessary to the fundamental human need of belonging. The framework for this inquiry is aging in place, which addresses the need for older adults to have the ability to age in a home or community in which they have a sense of meaning and connection to their physical environment. In our specific project, we invoke notions of aging in the right place. Aging in the right place recognizes that an individual's unique vulnerabilities should be supported by secure and optimal housing, and considers the intersections of age and disadvantage. The AIRP framework supports the complex health and social needs of older persons with experiences of homelessness, and considers the reality that inadequate housing can contribute to worsening health and further marginalization. For this project, I was specifically interested in understanding the role nature plays in supporting older adults with experiences of homelessness to age in the right place. The AIRP partnership is an interdisciplinary inquiry examining the experience of older residents of supportive housing in Calgary, Canada. We conducted photovoice interviews, a participatory action methodology wherein research participants are asked to take photographs of subject matter that reflects their unique experiences, subsequently explaining the photography. Through this process, individuals storied their experiences of supportive house promising practices in relationship to aging in the right place. Homelessness is a traumatic experience that negatively affects health and well-being. Older persons with experiences of homelessness often possess the physical and mental health characteristics of non-homeless individuals that are 10 to 20 years their senior. Community connections and stress management can work as protective factors from the harmful experiences of homelessness. A potential means of community connection and stress management is the ability to have ongoing relationships with nature. One such connection is biophilia. Biophilia can be defined as the inherent human inclination to affiliate with nature, and biophilic design aims to create habitats that advance health, fitness, and well-being through relationship with nature. In later life, spending time in nature has a beneficial impact on physical, mental, and social health. Age-related mobility, which can impact an older adult's physical relationship with nature, can be mitigated by well-designed neighborhoods, courtyards, and through biophilic design. Shelter residents in our study described a preference for courtyards, flower gardens, local parks, and windows with a view of trees to support aging in the right place. Particularly animated descriptions were told of those living in the trees, including birds and squirrels. In photos of these spaces, emotive language included relaxing, peaceful, soothing, beautiful, and comfortable. A second aspect of biophilic design expressed by shelter residents related to companion animals. A myriad of physical and mental health benefits have been attributed to human interactions with companion animals, including improved immune function, reduced cardiovascular stress, reduced anxiety, depression, and loneliness, and often individuals find solace in their non-judgmental acceptance and unconditional love. For older adults, companion animals promote relaxation, help to manage loneliness and grief, prevent social isolation, and provide a sense of purpose. There is a shortage of supportive and affordable housing that is pet-friendly, and often older adults are put in the difficult position of choosing between housing and their companion animals, which has negative effects on health and well-being. Shelter residents express their desire for companion animals as well as interaction with wild animals like squirrels and pigeons to allow them to age in the right place. Relationships with nature for older persons with experiences of homelessness living in supportive housing is a socio-spatial justice issue. Interactions with green space and animals in their everyday environments may improve their quality of life, contribute to placemaking, and foster aging in the right place. We recommend that shelters need to incorporate biophilic design, pet-friendly, green, affordable, and supportive housing options to ensure that older adults with experiences of homelessness can age in place.
So actually maybe can skip to the activity. So next slide. That is just a summary of what are kind of the key components of using arts-based methods in research and what that involves. And as you could hear at the end of that digital short, there were policy recommendations that I'll talk a little bit more about that emerge from doing this type of research. So for our activity, we wanted everybody to experience and think about and reflect on how doing arts-based methods, particularly surrounding housing and experiences of space, differ from a lot of the dominant research methods and modalities that we come to understand what's needed. So I would like everyone, we're going to take 5 minutes to do this. I'm going to I set my timer so on time. So please grab your pen or drawing implement, writing implement, and any piece of scrap paper or something like that to draw on. And I would like everybody to take a couple deep breaths and envision inside your mind's eye, where is the space or place that you go to relax and restore when you're feeling overwhelmed, or where is that space that you want to go to that fills you back up and relaxes you? And as you do this, I'd like you to tune into your senses. And I'll just take you through those quickly. So consider what you see. Consider what you feel on your skin. Consider what you taste in your mouth. Consider what you smell. And then consider what you hear. And now, if you were to explain that to somebody else through a different art modality, instead of just using words, draw a quick picture, write a haiku, or perhaps take a photograph or find an image that encompasses those experiences. And I'm gonna got a few minutes to do that. And one of the art prompts too, for those of us who aren't necessarily poetically or drawing gifted, or that's not a practice that we do all the time. One of the things I do is I will open up Google Images and type in what immediately came to mind when I went through the first through the senses. Although I see, Matt, you're so quick. You've already written a beautiful haiku about this. That's amazing. I'm going to give a couple more minutes to everyone else as well. Thank you, Patrick. I'm seeing some common themes between the two pieces. Hearing birds outside, nature. Mine would probably be my front porch, so. Let's take one more minute. Let's see this, Erin. Oh, that's a beautiful image you found. Thank you, Erin. Yes, did anyone draw anything? We're coming up to the end of our 5 minutes. Did anyone do a drawing? Wallace, on a warm, sunny day on a grassy hill, hearing birds and smelling the sweetness of the grass and flowers, while overlooking a calm bike path below with cyclists passing by. It's very evocative. Yeah. Christine might be speeding by on her road bike. Those are all wonderful. And for me, listening, well, reading, seeing, you know, the picture that you shared, Erin, does anyone have anything else that you'd like to share before we? Okay. Well, thank you all for going along with that. Can I have the next slide? So just also wrapping up, thinking about dissemination, when these pieces, when the data that is being, you know, produced is art and is effective and is it lends itself to community dissemination and cultivating, I would also say, social empathy within the communities who are on the receiving end of it, but it also really is a process of empowerment for many of the residents to have their photographs, have their pieces of art, have their stories shared with community. And one of the James House residents, when we did the community art show, shared that little show they put on gave me the confidence I hadn't had in years. So it's a multi-level process of possibilities of empowerment for individuals participating. So can I have the next slide? And I believe that's over to Kari. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kari.
Thank you, Alison. Hi, everyone. I just want to say thanks for having me here. It's been a great pleasure being part of this webinar. And as I'm newer to the world of research, I've enjoyed every piece of this. So if anyone's considering research in the future, you should definitely do so. So for my portion of the presentation, I'm just going to outline some of the key findings from examining the literature surrounding arts-based methods and delve into how this information can help inform policy design and housing design for older adults experiencing homelessness. So through a lot of the literature, we can see that there's a clear increase in the application of arts-based methods in research. Historically, arts-based research methods have been questioned in qualitative research. And I think these credibility gaps are due to an insufficient existing body of literature on the topic. But it's promising that recent advances in the field are identifying the wide use of arts-based methods to bring diverse and marginalized perspectives to the forefront of policy. It looks as though researchers in social sciences are actually broadening what is considered valuable knowledge and looking toward more experiential and embodied ways of knowing to inform research. So some research actually is recommending the use of arts-based methods as key knowledge practices to better promote the development of more inclusive policy. So in this presentation, we draw on our own research practice to consider the ways in which arts-based methods can influence policy development and also inform shelter and housing design. So the arts and qualitative research do offer alternative ways for participants to engage in studies, participate in meaningful discussion beyond general academia. And I think that that's great because it can be intimidating to engage in research. So it looks as though through the literature, it's demonstrating clear value in expanding research to include more subjective experiences of participants to meaningfully inform the development of more inclusive policy and also to help outline what's currently lacking in current policy designs as well. So we can move on to the next slide, please. So what we see is that practical uses for arts-based methods can take shape in research to inform policy design in housing. So arts-based methods, as mentioned before, are able to fully engage participants in deeper reflections and help inspire new understandings of their own circumstances. So an example I came across was a study, like through the literature review, was a study by VABE that utilized participant photography and narratives to identify pertinent issues in the participants' community in regards to their housing situations. So then researchers, by drawing on participants' firsthand experiences and perspectives, they were more easily able to identify the existing gaps, and then that allowed researchers to better support and advocate for more sustainable housing policy. So as we're part of the Aging in the Right Place team, when we're considering older adults experiencing homelessness, it's critical to understand their unique circumstances when it comes to housing. And this is especially true considering that older adults who've experienced homelessness are at risk for more adverse health complications that are amplified from being unhoused. So making it that much more important to ensure that appropriate and sustainable housing policies are created. So when drawing from the findings from the literature, we can definitely see clear value in utilizing arts-based methods to influence policy development, particularly in terms of housing for the older population. So through the literature review, it's clear that policy implications derived from the experiences of older adults is largely absent in the literature. So I think as a corrective, AIRP would propose that using arts-based methods can ensure housing and secure older adults can be part of the development of new and improved housing policies. Next slide, please. All right, so then in our own research for the AIRP project, they combine multiple methods, including qualitative and arts-based approaches, such as photovoice, to better understand the unique experiences of older adults experiencing homelessness, with the intent to improve promising practice and overall service delivery for this population. So photovoice in this context allows older adults to reflect on and express their lived experiences. So these accounts from participants can provide concise summaries and inform policymakers of the existing circumstances and also what actions need to be taken to implement beneficial policy for this population. So that's what I had. Next slide. I can pass it back to Alison.
Thanks, Kari. So an example, because we've focused on some of the biophilic design recommendations, both design and operations, and some of the art space materials that we've shared today from the data. So for example, we have just published, well, we're in the process of publishing a paper on biophilic design recommendations, specifically for supportive housing, or I guess temporary emergency shelter. And what that actually looks like from a design policy perspective, and then also what needs to be done within the operation policies within shelters. And this is based on specifically all of the different aspects of biophilia and connection to nature, and how that impacted both physiological and psychological wellness of the residents. Other ones that we have that we're looking at, so you can see actually on this slide a design example, the importance of, supportive housing needs to have private outdoor green space, and what that would specifically involve. And then, as well as Kari indicated, operations examples of how companion animals need to be included within shelter policies. And I see we have some good questions that are answering kind of our last slide, which if you can go to, Leah. So we wanted to hear from you as to kind of launch the discussion. What is a policy question you might have around providing, designing, operating these types of spaces, and how art-based methods might be used? Question of whose voices do you need to listen to, and what art-based methods would be useful? So we wanted to put that out as a brainstorm, but I also already see that we have someone who is asking this question, or very much along those lines, Claire. So maybe we should open it up to the questions and discussion along these lines.
I can jump back in. It's Leah, but I think that when I do, we might lose our full screen of these questions. But let me just see what happens. Oops, that's not what I wanted. So I think when I look at the chat, you see a black box over our screen. Is that correct? Okay. So Alison, in responding to these questions, would you like the audience to bring forward out loud some of these questions that they have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Or put them in I can see the webinar chat as well. So, like, for example, from Erin and I believe Claire already talking about
Right.
it. So it looks
have...
like, Erin,
Yeah.
you're asking, for you, it would be whose voices do you need to listen to? Might be individuals with developmental disabilities. Is that?
I think she's wondering if maybe those individuals are being included in your study as well.
There are some individuals definitely who are in that population.
So
And
it's not our target population, but we have included our colleague who does that target population. And in response to an earlier question, these kind of approaches we've used internationally with young people, with, as we've shared today, with older people, with people with all different kinds of positionalities. And I think what you have to do is be open to figuring out how they would work with the population that you're dealing with. And we've just shown you a snippet of our work, but I think when you're going to think about doing it, if you really understand your population and you consult with them and you work with them, then they will share with you the best way to bring their voices through the arts to your research and your questions and your solutions.
Thank you, Christine. There's a great question in here from Claire, and I feel the same way as you do, Claire. I have so many questions, but this is a really compelling one. It was one that I wrote down as well. Is what has been your biggest policy win to date? And maybe I would add to that sort of how you've gauged the receptivity of decision makers when they get this kind of evidence-based but expressive, maybe expressive-based data from you.
Do you have a big policy?
Yeah, I think when you look at the research about what influences policymakers, it's really stories. And they hear stories all the time through your literature, through your publications, and of course we do that. But to be able to show a compelling story, imagine that the little short video that was a student who worked on that with us for a very short period of time. It's very compelling. I've seen the first time I saw a photovoice, it wasn't my research, but it was a mayor was at this opening and committed to the woman who said this was the problem, committed to having a stop sign on her street so her son who has autism would be protected. And I've seen it time and time again, people being changed by being exposed to real stories and moved. And these stories can be presented as poems, as theater, as and if you think back to the exercise that Alison walked us through, I think everybody could do it. These are human experiences, and when we, through our education system, we've lost much of it, but be sharing stories with, they still have this potential. So I think it's thinking about it deeply. In what ways can you meaningfully collaborate to gather stories and present those stories?
And so, for example, I'm not sure, I saw there were some people here from Treaty 7 territory, so from Alberta, I'm presuming, and if anyone has been following the news around housing in Calgary right now, around the exclusionary zoning, and all of that. So I was on the task force that came up with the zoning, part of the recommendations. And it was, I mean, there was a lot of discussion about, but really emphasizing the need to get rid of the exclusionary zoning and actually move on housing and do recommend actions to policy and zoning municipally that was not politically palatable, as you've seen in Calgary from, I think it's the longest public hearing in Calgary history, was some of it was including these and sharing lived experience stories of the impact of not having housing. So, and that included some of the AIRP stories that were shared with on the as part of the task force. So it's, I think as Christine said, and as you see in the chat, when it really humanizes people's experiences, it makes it a lot more difficult to say it costs too much or it's not politically expedient, or all those different stories that we hear around the built environment. Especially Claire, you said you're in building sciences, so if you're at those design decision-making tables and going through the pro forma, it provides that evidence for why we do have to include a courtyard, why we do have to have connection to the outdoors when we're making those decision-making. So it is so much, yeah, about that. But hopefully by sharing with all of you in here and seeing the possibilities, and you felt it as well, you know, looking at the digital short and things like that, it can be really persuasive.
And I think some of the things, I'm not an architect, but I think some of the things don't seem that expensive to me, like having a tree where a squirrel could be or a bird could fly overhead. I don't know how much of that is costing, because you're not building it. Maybe you're just protecting a tree that's already there.
You'd be surprised, but yeah.
Surprised about the resistance to planting a tree. Yeah.
Or keeping it.
Or keeping the tree. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, for example, in a complex needs with persons with developmental disabilities project I worked on in Calgary, they wanted to cut down all of the trees because they thought someone might hide in them. So it's it's all of these, understanding what all of these factors are, but understanding that those decisions that we make have really profound impacts on individuals who will be habiting these spaces.
And I think some of the things are the groups that we're working with are highly stigmatized. So maybe they don't deserve a tree, or they don't, so I think we need to portray the humanness in them. And these are effective ways to do that. And so, yes, they deserve a tree. They deserve, these other things that we should be attending to in the design.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a lovely sort of full circle thing for us to throw back at this team of brilliant researchers is, are these activities worthwhile to inspire creativity with the partners that are maybe resisting some of these policy changes, that they need to move through these exercises with you to unlock creativity and unlock their own sensory experience to come up with more integrative solutions to protect the tree, or to to better understand the data. I know that we have to go now, and I also am like, oh, but I want to ask Shannon's question too about like translating this expressive data into actual hard evidence that can be used, especially if it's nonverbal. Maybe that's a follow-up webinar that we're just going to have to do, because Kari, I want to hear your thoughts on codifying this data. How do you do that when it's not language based, and all that good stuff? So for all of you who are still here and you just want to keep talking, I hear you. I do too, but we do have to let you go. So thank you so much, Kari, Alison, and Christine. This was really enriching. And thank you to everyone who participated and really dug in with everyone. It was a really meaningful experience. We hope to have you back maybe for a part 2. We can keep learning more about it. But that's all we have time for today. So I did mention that the contact information to connect with everyone is available. I didn't actually end up showing that slide, but we'll make sure that you get that and that you get the slides so you can have reference to that. If you enjoyed the webinar today, please, and you haven't already, please sign up for the Expert Community on Housing. We have an amazing series of webinars planned for this year to continue talking about these really critical pieces to the housing ecosystem. So thank you for taking the time today, all of you panelists and attendees, and enjoy the rest of your day. Go and enjoy this beautiful season. Take care. And Sandy, you can stop recording.